Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at Union Stockyards, which is a 2 to 5 player worker placement board game that takes 45 to 90 minutes to play. Now before I get started on my review of Union Stockyards, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so I've set up for a 2-player game of Union Stockyards here. Now this board is double-sided, so if you were to play with 3 to 5 players, then you'd use the reverse side, which changes the look of the game a little bit just to compensate for the extra space that you need. Now this game is all about the stockyards in Chicago during the second half of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. So it's a pretty bleak theme, but a pretty unique theme at that. Now the idea of this game is you're trying to get as much money as you can, because money is points, and that comes from cold hard cash that you have in your hand, as well as the banked money you have represented by this score track here. Let's take a brief look at the board just to get you familiar with the way things look. So in the top left-hand corner here, you have these building cards that you can buy, and they come with a bunch of different information on them, such as the size of the buildings that you'll be placing on the actual packing town grid here, and they're represented by these rather chunky wooden buildings. You have the benefit of that building, such as let you climb up these different livestock tracks to increase your profit margins. So you have 3 different types of livestock. You have the cows, the pigs, and the sheep. You'll come with some flavor text here, and it'll also come with these end game points here. So you can see here that if I was to build this soapworks, I'd get 3 points at the end of the game. Now some cards also come with these little white symbols in the bottom left hand corner, and that correlates to the specialist cards that would give you some additional bonuses if you are the first player to reach those symbols. So you can see here, for me to get this canned ham specialist card, I'd need 2 of those canned meat symbols there, and that will give me an extra boost on the pig track. You've got the brand reputation track here, which means you're trying to climb up it again to increase your profit margins, but it'll also give you some bonus points if you are the player furthest up at the end. You have the yards here, which will show the amount of livestock that are available to be slaughtered in order to get that money straight out from the bank. You've got these different locations which relate to these little huts you're trying to put down, which will give you some more end game scoring. And again, we mentioned the packing town here, where you're trying to build your buildings, create a bit of a network, and hopefully touch these different symbols in order to put them on those locations. You have a Union spirit marker here, which basically represents the morale of your workers, and if it reaches this red area, then you have to forsake your workers and basically work with fewer workers throughout the round. And you'll also, that'll be represented by this picket line here, and you'll also gain one of these kind of unhappy tokens, which will build up as negative points at the end. So you're going to have your own little player board here, which shows, it holds your huts, it holds your workers, it'll hold your low morale tokens, and show the penalty prices. You can see there's quite a few negative points there if you end up collecting 5 or more. And this is a really good little turn structure breakdown to show all the different actions and the phases and how they're resolved. General pieces consist of the money. You've got the first player marker here. You've got the spare livestock, which will go into those yards should they be needed. You've got these viaducts and all the different buildings. So let's take a look at how the game actually works. So the first thing you're going to do is you are going to do the start of year phase, where you're going to be adding livestock to the yards depending on the current price. You can see here that at the start of the game, all of the livestock's base price is right at the bottom here, meaning you only add 1 of each to those yards. Now this would be in addition to the ones put there in setup, and as these price rises, you might be putting more pigs or cows, sheep, etc. onto those areas. You'll also be flipping over the year card here, which is kind of an event card for the current round, and this will also dictate the morale. So you can see here that this will force the Union spirit marker to go up like so. As mentioned earlier, if it did go into that red area, then you would have to forsake a worker and take an unhappiness marker. But let's just say it did not happen. And this event card will also give you a particular kind of bonus or something going on in that particular round. You can see here a new worker placement space has been revealed, meaning that I can place my worker here to go one up the pig track. And there's a ton of these in the game. You're going to use different ones each time, and you use one for each year, each representing 6, or each of the 6 rounds. And once you've done that small bit of admin, you're going to go into the main work phase, which is where you are going to be placing your workers in turn and taking the corresponding bonuses. So let's take a look at what all the different worker placement spots do, because they all are pretty straightforward. So you've got the contract work one, where you simply get $1 from the bank, and money is quite tight in this game. You can build viaducts, which are these small black buildings, which are quite flexible in order to build things. We'll talk about the relevance of that later. You've got the buy land action spot, where you are going to either pay $2 or $3, depending on how fast you can get there, in order to place one of your land ownership markers onto the packing town grid. And this basically represents that you own that particular grid of land. So you can see here, me as the yellow player, the Kudahe player, I now own these 6 squares, and that corresponds to the build action, where again you will pay money equal to where you're building essentially. So let's just say I wanted to build this sausage kitchen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find the building of the matching colour. So this is going to be the white square, and I'm going to place this somewhere on the grid. Now, if I place it on neutral ground like this, I will be paying $1 for each square that I cover. However, if I build it on my own land, then it's going to be free. So this would cost me nothing, considering I already own that land. But if I build on somebody else's grid, so let's just say the blue player built here, then that's going to cost them a coin to me for every piece of land of mine that they use. Now, there's also going to be some additional things you can do by placing buildings. So, for example, you'll get a point for every building of the same colour that you're touching. So if I was to build this one and then to build this one after, because this white building is touching a white building, you'll get another point for doing that. And obviously, once you've paid for the building and placed it there, you are going to take the corresponding reward. In this example, going 1 up the pig track and going 1 up the reputation track. And you can see here that also these buildings have end game points. So that's the building action. You also have these few spots up here which simply let you climb up the brand reputation track by spending either 2 in order to go up twice or nothing to go up once. You've got the campaign spot, which will give you 2 points and let you flip over this this marker at the end of the round to basically reveal a new worker placement spot, which will either be the Republican or Democrat side, where you can do this 8-hour day one, which will let you shed one of those low morale tokens and go down on the Union Spirit track, or this one here, which will let you establish 2 branches instead of the regular one you'd get from this spot here. Now, there's also these yard spots, which you are going to be placing your workers like you would normally in order to slaughter that particular animal. So in this example, I might want to kill this cow. I'm going to have a look at my particular standing on that track and basically work out the profit margin. So you can see here that I'm buying cows in at 14 and I'm selling them at 16. Therefore, I would get a profit of 2 money from the bank. And you can only ever go to these spots once per round. And once all the players have placed their workers on the board, the player who went to the campaign spot will get to choose that worker placement spot, which we mentioned earlier. You're going to retrieve all your workers from the board, and then you are going to adjust the livestock prices based on how many are left on the yard. So you can see here that if there is the least frequent type of animal in the yards is going to go up in value by 3. So in this example, it's going to be the cows, because that's the only one that's been slaughtered. Therefore, that is going to go up 3, squeezing my profit margins and even losing me money in this example. And the ones with the most there is going to go down by 2. Now, that would normally go down, of course, but these are right at the bottom anyway. So you've got to be quite careful about, not always taking the animals, because sometimes the price is going to go up rapidly, again, making you make a lot less money when you kill them. And that's essentially what you do for out of the 6 rounds of the game. The player with the most points at the end of the game will be the winner. And bearing it in mind that you will also be adding points based on these branches here, which correspond to this part of the game. So if you ever end up building and touching one of these symbols, you're going to take the matching symbol and place it on the matching location, like so, meaning that that's some potential endgame points there if I was to build some branches there. So you can see here that for each branch that I have in these locations, you're going to get 2 points per the particular symbols there. So it's a nice little multiplier there, and there are even wild ones that you can put down in order to double up. So they're quite useful to have if you manage to get a bunch of your branches down in a populated city. And they're also going to factor in that you're going to lose points for these low morale tokens. And again, you're going to add up all the points you got from the end of the game with the money you have left in your hand, and the player with the most points at the end will be the winner. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on Union Stockyards. Now, this is actually a pretty straightforward worker placement game, but there is, of course, a degree of supply and demand, and this is a very important part of the game because you do need that cash flow. You know, when you do kill these animals, that is going to keep your money flowing in order to take the actions that you want. And something that I didn't mention in the overview was that keeping these profit margins positive is important, because at the end of the game you are going to get additional money depending on your standing. So if you are really high above, that's a bunch of points there, or if you're below, you're actually going to be losing points. So that's a very important part of the game there. But despite being very simple, there are a few things that I found quite intriguing. Number one is the land ownership mechanism. This idea of spending, $2 or $3 and then claiming 6 particular squares for yourself. Now, there's different approaches where you can tackle this. Are you going to be awkward and build exactly where you know your opponent wants, so that when they build on top of your spots, you are going to get some passive income there? Or are you going to build exactly where you want to go because you are building towards something and you want to get those kind of adjacency bonuses, or maybe even tackle these location markers? Now, I did like the idea and the potential of, kind of extorting other players out of wanting to build where you want to. But in practice, and maybe this is a group dependent thing on my personal group, we kind of just kept to ourselves and ended up laying that foundation to where we wanted to go, rather than kind of encroaching on other people's. But maybe that's just me, but I didn't really see the massive incentive to mess with other players as it was to just build on my own land for free. So I think there's a lot of potential here for the mechanism, but I'm not quite sure this used it to the degree that it could have been used, because it's such an interesting idea. Now, I also feel the same way about this Union Spirit marker. It's a cool concept where if you neglect it enough and venture into that red area, you are going to take a low morale marker, which is obviously extremely punishing, but you'll also have to forsake a worker for the entire round. But because everybody is affected by this, it feels like nobody is affected by this. If we all have a worker less, then we're all on equal playing field anyway. So I think it would have been a good idea if everybody had their own independent morale track rather than a communal one. Now, I understand this thematically makes sense as it is a union, but it's just a nitpick there, and something I would have liked to have seen a bit offset so that people are doing different things, and it gives you something else to juggle. And it makes the urgency to get to spots like this a lot more important, because because somebody could get hit really hard if they ignore it completely. The supply and demand mechanism in this game is rather simple, but it does work well. At the start of the round, the animals are going to get replenished depending on the current value. And of course, at the end of the round, the values are going to change based on how many are available in the yards there. And sometimes you do have to be quite observant about where other players are going, because if you keep on spamming the same animal type because it's your most, your best profit margin, then inevitably the base price is going to go up, meaning that your margins are squeezed, and then you're not going to make as much money in the future. So sometimes you might think, I'm going to go for a different animal this time, but to keep my margins strong here. And you can even maybe manipulate the board state a bit, because you know that your opponent maybe has a small margin on one, and then you can squeeze it down. So you can actually manipulate these quite cleverly should you wish to. The pacing of these branch houses is relatively interesting, because of course you can put the branch houses in there before there are these kind of multipliers, or vice versa. And you'll find that sometimes if somebody has put all their branch houses down in one before there's anything there, then inevitably the other players are going to do their best to prevent them putting these wild tokens down, because there is only 2 of those. And in reverse, if there is, say, 2 markers in there, then all of a sudden everybody is going to be rushing to these spots in order to populate them with their own tokens to get those endgame scoring. So it does have that cool little back and forth there. Are you going to claim your stake there before it's guaranteed points, or are you going to hope that you can sneak in there once it's been guaranteed, or once there's points guaranteed there for the taking? The attention to detail when it comes to the theme here is quite impressive. All of the building cards have flavor text on. The same goes with the specialist cards and also the yearly event cards. So it's nice that you can read up on here and learn a bit about the subject matter. And it's nice that these event cards add a little bit of punch and spice to each round, by adding a new worker placement spot, or this one here gives you money, but it gives you an unhappiness marker, so maybe you are desperate for money but are willing to take that marker. Having more supply there when it comes to the yards. There are tons of different things you can do here which are generally positive, but some of them are not positive at all. Like some of them might be things like give up another worker for the round, which makes things particularly tight. I think the game scales pretty well from 2 to 5 players. I think they've done a good job of keeping the board feeling tight but not too restrictive. And of course the player interaction in this game is fairly standard with a worker placement game. There's good competition to rush to the spots, so there's that urgency, which is what you need. A rush to get to the buildings that you want, because you might have the perfect building that you need. And of course, even the race to get to the specialist tiles and to establish those branches. So very passive player interaction here. Of course, there's that little bit of spice when it comes to the land ownership, but I mentioned that doesn't really play out as interactively as I would have hoped. But still, I think, it's what you'd expect from a medium lightweight Euro in terms of the player interaction. I'm happy with the production for this game. I actually think it looks really cool when it's on the table. It might not be everybody's cup of tea because it is pretty drab looking, I suppose. But the actual physical quality of the components is good. These big, hefty, chunky wooden buildings look great when they're on the table. Definitely went above and beyond when it comes to those. And I think one of the strongest things about this game is the iconography and the fact that you have all the information available to you at all times at a glance. So you can see here that you've got the year-end livestock price adjustments all right in front of you, all the end game scoring in front of you, the turn structure in front of you. So you actually never need to go back to the rulebook to learn anything. The card stock is high quality. They are linen finished cards. Nice photographs on the cards as well, and of course they really went above and beyond when it comes to the flavor text and being historically accurate, that kind of stuff. So full props in that regard. Maybe it looks a little bit amateurish at times when it comes to the player boards. It looks very Kickstarter and prototypey, but personally I've got no issue with that at all, and I'm generally happy with the way that it looks and the way it's put together. Okay, so let's share some final thoughts on Union Stockyards. And I have to say that this game is nothing like what I was expecting. This is a very simple, medium, lightweight, economic worker placement game that's very accessible. And that kind of threw a spanner in the works for me because I was expecting something a lot more heavier and a lot more complex, mainly due to the theme and the setting here, because this is quite a niche setting. It's not going to be for everybody. It's quite grim and macabre to some people because, it is about slaughtering animals for profit. Now, I personally like the setting because it's different. It's a fresh lick of paint on an overexposed genre of games, I suppose. Now, the economic side of the game is fairly light. You are just trying to keep on boosting your profit by essentially buying buildings and doing little things here and there. So the actual decision space here isn't massive, and certainly not what I was expecting. I think the gameplay generally is pretty predictable and paint by numbers. Now, that is coming from the perspective of somebody who plays a lot of medium heavy to heavyweight Euros, and I understand that this maybe gameplay is not for me. It's not bad, but it's not for me. Now, what I struggle to understand is who is really going to pick this game up and get longevity out of it, considering that, the gameplay isn't terribly deep, but the setting is going to be off-putting to a lot of people because normally these entry-level worker placement games have a family-friendly setting to them. You think of the classics like Everdell, you think of Lords of Waterdeep, you think of games like Stone Age. Those games stand the test of time because they are so welcoming to players. Even though the gameplay is fairly light and fluffy and there's not that much decision space, they keep people coming back to them because they've got a niche what they're looking for. This one has that style of gameplay, but the setting is very adult and it is, again, very niche. So sometimes, generally, a pattern in the board gaming space is that the more niche a theme and setting is, it means that the audience is going to be more niche, which generally leans towards heavier games. So I think this is going to struggle to find its audience for that reason, because it is just a polar opposite of what it's presenting to what it actually is. But the gameplay is solid. It's clearly been well researched. It's clearly a passion project, and I'm certainly happy I've played it. But yeah, ultimately, I don't think this has got enough to keep me coming back to it, despite being so interesting in terms of the subject matter. You know, the economic part of the game with the supply and demand is good, it's fine, but it's nothing, mind-blowing. The spatial puzzle with the buildings is fine again. I love this land ownership mechanism, but sadly I don't think it's been used enough or been brought forward enough to make it a standout feature, and the rest of it is all pretty straightforward. So I can't really overly recommend this one. I would say, if you are interested in it and you do want a worker placement game that's easy to get to the table, but you want to veer away from those ones that you've probably played 1,000 times, then maybe this is one to look at. But ultimately, I think there are better worker placement games out there if you want something heavier, and maybe more welcoming games if you are looking for something a bit lighter. So that's my thoughts on Union Stockyards. I'm a little bit disappointed, if I'm honest, because I was very much looking forward to it. But I think that's more of a fact of being not a bad game at all. It's just not what I'm looking for right now.